Good morning, everybody. The last part of the conference, after we have the fundamental right to coffee, we will be dedicated to policy issues rather than legal issues. And my topic is the bridge between those two. It is, at the moment, mostly a policy issue and not a law issue. It is part of a bigger evolution for those of you who follow it. It's called Work 4.0. So the impact of the world of work of a number of big trends, including technology, internet, information and communication, devices, sensors, artificial intelligence, robots, etc., reducing most of mankind to the economic equivalent of a horse? Question mark. As part of that big evolution, you have a frontal assault of the work of labor by internet platforms. Internet platforms may or may not be eating us alive. I'll give you a couple of illustrations. If we think, most of you are lawyers, employment law lawyers, you think about an employment relationship, you think about parties, you think about what the parties themselves need to become a party of that employment relationship, what it needs for the company, what it takes for the employee, and how the legal relationship between those two works. And from all angles, there is an assault by the platforms. And I'll show you some examples. The first one is you can have a company without needing company budgets and company kind of weight, and just start working collaboratively with others that will contribute somehow to your initiative. That's called crowdworking and crowdfunding. There are a multitude of other examples. I just pick a number of big names. Second is the feel-good factor of reducing the need of property. If you want to have organized work, you need a lot of tools and stuff like that. You don't need them if you can share them. Yeah? Third is if you transfer it to the service economy and all the necessary equipments for the service economy to work, which is meetings and plannings and discussions and data management and reporting and all that kind of stuff surrounding knowledge work, that can be taken over by platforms or shared on platforms. So you don't need all those organizational tools anymore inside your business. Fourth is you don't need any infrastructure and you don't need a lot of payroll, because you will just sit together somewhere with other people and do whatever it is that you do on an ad hoc basis. And that's a platform that gives you that opportunity, and you pay into the platform for that opportunity. That's all the business side of the platform economy. If we turn to the people side of the platform economy, most, I would say, visible for most of us. I think very few of us in this room do not order online. Maybe you just do it on the side and it's not your way of life, but I'm sure almost all of you have done it at some point. And then at the moment, it takes somebody to bring that to you. And then, of course, you have the question, what's the legal status of that somebody? And you have the issues behind me, the discussions about the position of transportation people, which is not a platform discussion. It's something we have had in employment law since we started with transportation services. So that's not new, it's just being boosted by the rise of online commerce. Crowdsourcing, we're getting closer to the core of our topic, is where it's mostly kind of business to business. If you're a small business or you have a business task ahead of you and you're looking for specific skills. It may be presentation skills, it may be communication skills, it may be writing skills, it may be whatever it is. Yeah? and you just don't want to hire anybody, or you don't have the money to hire anybody. You just go online and you find somebody with skills. That's called sourcing the crowd. You have a platform which provides you with a cloud, and the cloud is a source. And I don't know if anybody has used any of these before, or ClickWorker or whatever. It's a fascinating thing. It allows you as an individual, for instance, if I would be attuned to this environment, I would not have spent like half a day making this presentation as nice as possible for you guys. I would just have gone to Upwork, sent out a kind of assignment to a group, and I would get proposals, templates, designs, etc., and I would accept or would refuse. And it's only when I accept the work that I pay. And when I do pay, it wouldn't cost me more than a couple of euros, for sure, for sure. And the person who has done this probably is somewhere in Bangladesh, because the platform takes away all jurisdictions. That's Upwork. If you've never done it before, give it a try. Yeah. That's business to business, if you like, and then, of course, there is the most visible. That's the business to consumer, where the platform is a third party. In the previous one, there is no third party involved in transactions or operations directly. But here you have a business to consumer thing where the platform serves as a kind of intermediary contact, facilitating the service and organizing everything around that service, making it very predictable, reliable, transparent, safe, etc., and cheap, of course, compared to the alternative. So that's what's out there, and I could mention hundreds of examples more. Now the question is, if I start with are we going to see the disappearance of work as we know it? Question mark. Yeah. So I want to put our feet on the ground, because there is a lot of hype always. And this is the current hype. Work 4.0 is the current hype. So how real is it? If you look at figures, and this is the latest from a kind of European slice, I'll give you some other examples. And there are new studies. If you're interested in them, feel free to send me an email, and I can share them with you. Yeah? Sharing economy. So this is PricewaterhouseCoopers, who did at the end of 2015 an estimate for the EU as we see it, and as they see it. And you can see 28 billion euros, which sounds like a big sum, until you realize that the European economy is 15 trillion. So the percentage is between the brackets of how big a slice of the economy that is at that moment. What is in there? It's almost only Airbnb and Uber. That's it. All the rest I've just told you, that's like very small stuff. Yeah. And of course, there are a number of companies, and they keep on multiplying. And then there was a prediction from PricewaterhouseCoopers, and the prediction was that it would multiply by a factor of 20 by mid-2020, which would make it, if you can do the math, which would make it 0.3% of the economy by 2020. But the economy will be bigger. I'm just doing it statically. Why is this growing, you might ask? Because there is supply and there is demand. Eh? Why is it growing? There are good sides and bad sides to this thing. The good side is that it's cheaper. It creates a lot of human interaction, peer-to-peer, individual human interaction. And there is a belief factor that it's more sustainable than the alternative of having organized business and organized employment. That's the good side. The bad side is that, well, it may not always be very straightforward who owns what and who gains what, and is everything kosher in there? Is the quality guaranteed, and is it legally secure, and all that kind of stuff. So that's the bad side. Who is in there? I think it's a very important thing to realize before I go to the legal issues, because the legal issues that are coming are very predictable, and predictably lead to questions of policy response. And before you think about policy response, you should know who you are talking about. So the sociology of the platform economy is as important as the economics. There's a lot of studies recently coming out about the sociology. So supply and demand. Who is the demand side? The demand side is the young millennial urbanite population. That's the demand side. It's not us. Okay? Maybe in the future it will be us. Who knows? So it's a young thing and it's a city thing. That's the two things to already acknowledge. At the demand side. At the supply side, who is doing it? Who are the on-demand workers? A lot of surveys out there. I'll give you a couple of pointers. If you look at the numbers, quantitatively, what you are looking at is, at any given moment in time, how much percentage of your active population is active on a platform. That's the question you're asking. The bottom line of that is that, first of all, it's hard to measure. But to the extent that we can measure, you're talking about a couple of percentage points in the leading markets, which in Europe is the UK, London, city. Yeah. So a couple of percentage at any given time of the working force, the active population, works on employment on a platform, through a platform. Which translate, if you think about the labor market, the active population in Europe, which is about 240 million, it translates, you can do the math, to somewhere between 2.5 and 7 million people, probably, at this very moment, working on a platform. Which is a lot and not a lot at the same time. Obviously, as an absolute figure, it's quite substantial. As a relative percentage, it's small. However, the absolute figure is a smokescreen, because you have to look what is behind it. And this is what is this slide. If you are active on a platform, the question obviously becomes, is it your livelihood? Is it the alternative of regular employment? And there the conclusion is, of these couple of percentages, only a couple of percentage actually depends on it for their main income. So of about 2 to 5%, only about 2.5% of 2.5% actually has this as a main job. So you're talking about a fraction of the working population. Yeah. That's why I say there is a difference between the hype and the reality at the moment. When you depend on it, in many cases, it's only temporarily. It's a phase you're in. Yeah? Incidentally, if you talk about who is then in those people who depend on it for their income, it's mostly, you know, the people driving. That's basically it. Yeah? So it's Uber. Yeah. If you look at, Uber has done a lot of work and keeps on doing a lot of work into its sociological research on who is doing what. It's very interesting to see the profile of the people who work there. It's a striking feature of platform work at the moment, that to the extent that we can measure it, the people are higher qualified than they would be doing the same job in the regular employment setting. So if you are a taxi person, your education profile is lower than an Uber person. I can give you more things. One of the striking things that comes out of the surveys, they're all surveys, you have to take them with a grain of salt, they're all surveys, is that a big percentage of the people who work on platforms do it because they like it. They like to be completely in control of what they do, when they do it. That's why it's young people doing it. It's a cultural thing, perhaps, or a generational thing, who knows. That's as far as we go. Yeah? So it's a very much, I want to stress this, it's very much small. It's growing, but it's not going to be very big, anytime soon. And to the extent that we can measure it, it looks like something that is mostly creating a different type of economic activity rather than replacing an old type of economic activity. So in terms of employment, it looks like it's more of a new type of employment, bringing new people into some kind of economic activity rather than a zero-sum replacement of traditional work by platform work. Bottom line. Yeah. Okay, we'll see where that goes. Very much a moving target. We will see where we are 5, 10 years down the road. Nobody really can predict it. Certainly I can't. Let's look at the legal issues. Obviously, from the perspective of the platform, the huge advantage, whether it's the business user or the consumer, is that it is completely at your fingertips. You use it when you want it and you get it. Or you work on it when you want it or need to and you get it and then it's over. Yeah? So the hyper flexibility, the on-demand thing, and the fact that everything is virtual and online and mobile and all that kind of stuff is a huge selling proposition. That's what drives the growth, yeah? Besides the cost, to which I will return later. You can contrast that then with our audience here, the audience of employment law. And of course, the audience of employment law can see, oh, that will create many legal questions. Yeah? Some of which Michel was addressing in his talk about working time. For sure, under the current state of the Court of Justice interpretation of the working time directives, it would be very hard to accommodate platforms under that jurisdiction and that jurisprudence, wouldn't it? Would be very hard. There is the issue of safety, security, insurance, which is high up the list of priorities of people looking at this. There is the issue, obviously, of pay. As I said, the bottom line, you may be very you may be a believer in the platform economy. You may think it's progress for mankind, and I leave that in the middle. The bottom line is the people that work on it, they don't get a lot of money. That's the bottom line. Yeah? And compared to any competitive services in the real economy, they get less money. There is a potential issue of taxes and kind of informal economy, but that's easy to solve, actually. You just have to do like Estonia or Belgium and say to the platform companies, if you want to operate in this country, we're going to make a deal, every transaction, instant tax payment to the government. It's all electronic anyway. Otherwise, you can't be in this jurisdiction. You choose. Yeah. So it's easy to solve, actually. The downside can actually be a plus side. If you use the platform wisely, it's the end of informal work. Now, come down to the heart of the matter, which is the employment status of the people involved. If you go, and I've over the course of a couple of years in my various teaching positions in various jurisdictions, I have mobilized my students to become investigative journalists and explore the world of contract clauses in the platform economy, because it is entirely contract driven, obviously. You step into it or you don't. Yeah? And if you step in, you just sign up. Yeah? And if you sign up, you agree to whatever the terms that this platform is presenting to you. It's no negotiation. It's in or out. There's no choice. Huh? Well, there is a choice to be in, but there's no possibility to start arguing and negotiating. So you look at that, and what do you see? What I see increasingly is dispute resolution mechanisms, with the attempt of foreclosing or forestalling any type of court debate. Yeah. Because in the early days, you talk about 4 years ago, in the early days, it was feel good, you know? But it's only when Uber started getting some claims in the United States that Uber then updated all its terms, where you have to sign up to alternative dispute resolution and so on and so forth, and that has gone a ripple through the platform world. So I think that's personally I think that's worrisome. Yeah? Another interesting part for us lawyers is that these platforms, as you know, they exist online. So a big question will be, what will be the applicable law? It's not because I'm driving Uber in wherever it might be, in Berlin, I think it's illegal in Berlin, but anyway, I may be misinformed, that I'm subject to German law. Not necessarily. If you sign up to Uber, actually in Europe, most likely will be Dutch law as a choice of law. For right or for wrong. I'm not saying it's legal, yeah? It's just the way it's set up. For us employment lawyers, there is nothing that smells like employment in that relationship. There's a great linguistic creativity calling people different names than worker, employee, and employer. Okay? I give you some examples behind me. Now, the bottom line of this, obviously, is the business model. Because it's an economy. So what's the business model? What does the platform, and here I zoom in on this slice at the end of my intro, where I say it's about platform work per se is the Uber kind of thing. Yeah? The rest, as I mentioned to you, is just so small at the moment. Yeah? So, what does it do? Uber says, well, we're just a platform. We connect people. Great. And then you have assets, yeah? And you share them with people. In the case of Uber, your car, not mine, your. Condition to be an Uber partner, Uber driver, is that you have the car. I'm not offering any car. I'm not in the business of cars, right? And then what I'm also offering you is complete, bureaucracy-free invoicing. You get paid, everything is invoiced for everybody instantaneously. Isn't that comfortable? So what these companies say is that we do dating for you, you do pooling, and we are a PayPal for you. That's it. So there is nothing that looks like an employment relationship in there. That's the way it's set up. That's the contract. And you know, as employment lawyers, that if you have to, step in there and say, but you're an employer and you're an employee, then you're going to have to attack this construction. So what does that mean? If we can look at it a little bit more specifically, because I'm sure to the extent that you follow this topic, and you have seen a couple of cases, all the cases deal with one question only at the moment, which is, am I independent or subordinate? That's the only question. But there are many more questions lurking in this construction. Let me show you. First of all, if you look at the contract. So the contract is when you sign up, that's your contract. What happens? Nothing happens. You just become a membership. It's a membership. Nothing happens in terms of activity. The activity only is organized when there is an offer and you accept it, and then under the terms of the membership, there is an ad hoc, instantaneous collaboration that is immediately over when it's performed. So this is one of the spectacular consequences of the platform economy, is that they slice, dice a work relationship into individual things. Yeah? It's just task-driven. Ad hoc, task-driven. So there is no overarching employment contract. Okay? At least you could argue it. Secondly, if you want to qualify a company to be an employer, that employer is only your employer because he has an obligation to provide work. That's the essence of an employment contract. There is no obligation to provide work. There is just the promise that if a lead comes, I'll let you know. Vice versa, for the employee, there is not a commitment to work, because if a lead comes, I can say thank you, but no thank you. Yeah? At least in theory. And this is, as I saw sociologically, this is a selling proposition, apparently, for the people in there. Yeah. The employer is the one who pays a salary for the work. The platform doesn't commit to paying you any salary. They just commit to transferring a payment from a client. I'm a PayPal provision. I don't pay anything to you. I transfer a payment from somebody else to you. And then there is subordination. Yeah? Am I subordinate? Am I self-employed? Or am I something in between? Question mark. That's the only question currently pending in the courts, with one exception I'll show you immediately. So if you look at the independent, which is the crux of the thing, this is where we have all the lawyers and the academics like myself being jolted into action, because we have seen this discussion many times before. The distinction between employee and subordinate in all jurisdictions. It's a very sophisticated environment, and we can play with this. Yeah? And we can say, oh, is this time going to be different? Yes or no? And so let me put that on the slide for you. The problem, what is the problem with the platform economy? It is that it has two sides. On the one side, there is what you see in front of you. Yeah? It is something that empowers the person who works, right? He's in control, it's his time, it's his asset, and he just gets paid for getting a job done. He's not committing to you, he's not giving you his labor force, and so on and so forth. Yeah? So that's one side. And if you put that, you cross that with the existing sophistication of employee versus independent, you're going to say, independent. It's okay to speak. And then there's the other side. The other side is that these companies, these platforms, they want to be a brand. If you have Uber on your telephone, wherever you are, they're in more than 80 countries, and you want to use the app, you expect the Uber service, right? Even though Uber is not providing a service, it's just connecting you. You expect a certain service. And if that service is not coming, Uber has no future. So, even though I'm not organizing the work, I'm just facilitating, I have an economic business necessity to make sure that the work is done in a certain way. Okay. And I want to be visible out there, because remember the thing about platforms, it's like Google, huh? So that's why Uber is so aggressive. It's the first platform that wins. Yeah? Because the more people use the platform, the better the platform, the more people join the platform until it becomes a monopoly. Yeah? So brand is important. The bigger I become, the more people I need, and these people are not under my control. They can come, they cannot come, they can leave, so I need to make sure that quality is there. If I say quality, I'm going to do some onboarding, some training perhaps. Yeah, you feel it coming. And then the app is very nice, empowering you, but it's also Big Brother. Wherever you are, the app is with you and monitors you and follows you, yeah, and times you. And then at the end, the app is used to rate you on this particular instance of your work. Every time, rating. Yeah? That's worse than employee status. Huh? So you feel it coming. And that's the problem with the case law. The problem with the case law is that this can go either way. If you are more convinced by the left side of the slide, you will call it independent. If you are more convinced by the right side, you'll call it an employee. And perhaps in some jurisdictions, there is something in between. Yeah? So it's hard to solve. It's hard to solve. I'll get back to the solution at the end. Let me just give you a couple of case law now, examples from case law. The first is the identity, the DNA, yeah? Where Uber has hit a wall called the Court of Justice. In a case that has to do with the legal environment of taxi services. That's an economic question. We are talking about the employment question. But for Uber, as important is the economic question whether or not it's a taxi company. Obviously, as you understand from my expose, Uber says, taxis, what's that? Oh, we're just a platform connecting. And that has not been embraced by the Court of Justice. So at the end, in November 2017, the Court of Justice in the context of EU law, so you have to be careful. In the context of EU law, in the context of Article 58, that has the exemption to the principle of free movement of services, there is this concept called services in the field of transport. It doesn't say transport services. It says services in the field of transport. Yes? And the Court of Justice had said, we are in the field of transport. Because what you do, even though it's a platform, it is inherently linked with transport. No? It's part of a kind of biotope of transport services. And the transport service cannot be organized without this platform. So it's a service in the field of. That has a knock-on effect, and the knock-on effect is obviously that Uber cannot rely on the free flow of services if it is physical, and it can also not rely on the principles of digital services, both of which serve to overcome national differences in regulation. Therefore, the consequence of this ruling is that domestically, in all the various member states of the European Union, it is okay for the domestic regulators to impose specific conditions to exercise the service in the field of transport which Uber is providing. I'm not saying that the automatic consequence is that Uber is a taxi company. I'm not saying that. You understand? It's a step further. Perhaps it's okay to make that step, but it's not necessarily implied. So that makes business for the Ubers of these worlds and the Lyfts and the BlaBlaCars and the others in the EU market more complicated, for sure. It can also have a knock-on effect on the question of the legal status of their drivers and partners. Because the argument, I'm just a platform, yeah, I'm not doing anything, I'm just connecting, that argument here is weakened, for sure. But of course, it's a bit of a strange case. If you are somebody who thinks that the physical world is so much 20th century, and that the 21st century is digital, you say this is a fossil, a dinosaur case. Yeah? Because are you going to say next that Airbnb is a hotel chain? Yeah? And that Facebook is a media company? And that Google is a marketing company? Yeah? Are you going to say that? Yeah? And the answer is no, we're not saying it. Yet. Who knows? Yeah? So anyway, it's a debate in itself. Uber is the heart of the debate of employment discussions. And I've told you, well, depending on how you feel it, you know, in almost all jurisdictions at the end of the day, it's going to be the judge that calls it and that can argue it either way. Yeah? So it depends how the judge feels. That's the bottom line. So in the UK, there is a very famous, I think it's the most important of the available precedents on the legal status of platform workers, in this case, Uber drivers in London, where there are about 35 to 40,000 of them at the moment. It is a very good case because in the good common law tradition of the UK, it's a big argument, you know, and it draws in all the perspectives. If you read one case about this, read that case. And then you have all the elements. But don't forget, while reading it, that it is a British case. And in the British case, there are two things here. One is that in the UK, under the Fair Labours Act or something like that, if there is a UK person in the room, correct me if I'm wrong, but there is this statute about fair labour conditions or whatever, and that statute creates a middle category between the independent contractor who owns his company and the employee, pur sang, the real employee. In the middle is somebody that's basically economically dependent and part of somebody else's organization. And the argument in this case is you're in that middle category, called for UK law, British law, or English law, it's called the worker, and not the employee, the worker. If you don't have that middle category, and most jurisdictions do not have a middle category between employees and independent contractors, it's an important one, but it has to be complemented with other dimensions. I give you one from South Africa. That's a commercial arbitration panel, also quite well argued, that says employee, period. Employee, not worker, employee. And then I give you a US and a French one. The US is perhaps famous or infamous in Florida, where the argument was that, yes, there is control, remember? Uber has to have control, there is control, but the control is on you actually taking person A to destination B. That's it. That's the control. It's not about the rest of the relationship. And that's what distinguishes it from an employee. The employee, the whole context is under control, and the whole organization of the work is under control, and not just the actual realization of a task, which might well be under the control if you have somebody coming to fit the roof. Yeah? You say you have to do that. Yeah? That doesn't make you the employer of the roof fitter. Yeah? It's that argument. So here you see the potential for the platform economy to escape employment law. The potential is to say, well, platforms, as I say, it's not a contractual relationship. It's just task, task, task. And if you then follow the Florida precedent, tasks, control of a task is not an employee, if you follow that. The French Conseil de Prud'homme is interesting as the outcome. The outcome is no employee. It's very uninteresting to read because it is a French case and not a common law case. So there is no argument. Huh? It's just, I'm the oracle and I'm telling it. The common law is very interesting to read, all the arguments. But I said there are two things to remember, so I'll say that here. In the common law, they don't do this kind of dissection of the employment relationship. Yeah? When I give you the slide, and I told you there are a number of things that differ from the employment relationship. Yeah? A number, not just subordination, a number. Yeah? No, maybe if you've forgotten it, I'll just quickly go back. Yeah? So this whole list of differences. In the UK, if you're a common law judge, you say, and I quote from the case more or less literally, a Shakespearean quote, "The lady thus doth protest too much," which comes from, I think, Macbeth, but I'm not sure. So you just, you make it too complicated, Uber. Yeah? Common law. Common law. That would be different in France or Belgium. We would look at this. Yeah? We would have to look at this. Yeah? So you have to be careful a bit with precedents. They may represent differences in things. That's the legal status. I still have 2 minutes, so I'll give you a couple of more legal issues relating to employment law. We will have social partners after our coffee break. What about collective bargaining and the platform economy? What we see, obviously, the advantage of the digital is that you can organize digitally. And this is what is happening. I'll give you one example here that is from the US, but there are others, where simply the distinction between who you are doing the platform work for, in what status you are, dependent, whatever, that's completely blurred, and we just have one common interest, and for that common interest, we unite. Okay? That's interesting from a legal perspective, because for those of you familiar with the legal status of collective bargaining, it is an exception to the competition law prohibition of price cartels, carefully allowed in the various legislations and statutes regarding competition domestically, and allowed by the Court of Justice in Luxembourg in the famous Albany case on the pension fund system in the Netherlands, where the court, without any basis in the treaty, says, yes, it's a cartel, but we're going to save it nonetheless. So that's going to be an interesting legal question. because what you have here from a company or an economic law perspective is various companies and other legal actors conspiring to set the price of their services for us consumers. Okay. So, 2 minutes about the future. First of all, so it's interesting. It's very fascinating to see where this might go. But it isn't there yet. That's important to understand. It is, I think, the most interesting part from a legal perspective is that the status becomes blurred even more than in the past. The organization of work is so automatic. Yeah? You have to understand what is behind this. What is behind is that the digital platform takes over the management of a labor collaboration. And in that regard, the labor can be organized on a purely ad hoc basis with zero overhead. Yeah. So the need of law, if you go back to the principles, why do we have law? We have law, economic law, labor law is economic law, partially at least. We have it because it reduces transaction costs and organizes information flows. Yeah? That premise is out. You don't need it anymore. The platform does it. That's the real disruptor. And then, of course, you have third parties coming into what used to be a two-party contract, the platforms. Personally, if you ask me, what do you think will happen? I don't have a crystal ball, but I will give you, I think, I can see two possible scenarios, personally. The first scenario is that this small size of the activity and of the labor force becomes bigger. And Uber becomes what it wants to become, the alternative for car ownership. And we will no longer own cars. We will just have transportation service at our fingertips when we want it, how we want it. If that becomes gradually reality, Uber and the others like them are going to become so big. They will need to cater for now every single, at any moment now, there are 10 million people driving an Uber somewhere on the planet. But if that becomes reality, it's going to be 1 billion. Right? Think about what that will need in terms of organization, for reliability, for quality and stuff like that. That is only feasible if you're going to hire people who do non-stop transportation and then you become an employer. That's what I think. Yeah. So if you become really big, yeah, you're going to become an employer, or at least for part of your drivers who do this almost full-time all the time, they will become employed, and maybe there will be another status for a group who does it on the side and some stuff like that. That, I think, is option number one. But I don't think it will be that option that will be the future. I will skip this. We can talk about this in the questions, but my time is out. This is the future. Yeah? It's actually the present, because you see here something that is already 2 years old. They now have, 25,000 SUVs from Volvo and others. The future of transportation is Robotaxi. Yeah? That's the future. There's not going to be a driver behind the wheel. That's the future. And I can tell you why. I can tell you there is a very powerful economic reason, because if you follow this a little bit, all these big companies out there, they're all loss-making companies. They have not made a single cent, euro cent, dollar cent of profit. And they won't. Not until they take out the single biggest cost factor of the entire operation, which is more than 60% of what they do. Can you think about it? 60% of the cost is the driver. If you're a little bit familiar with economics, yeah, and you look at today's employment in today's physical world, and ask yourself which companies have 60% of their total revenue going to labor cost. You wouldn't think it's digital companies at all. Yeah? So this is not going to stay. This is not going to stay. It's a no-brainer. It's a no-brainer. Also, we will want to, because of course these cars will be much more reliable, safer, even though somebody will die along the way, as had happened recently. Yeah, but 1.5 million people die in traffic every single year on the planet, huh? And the car is 1,000 times better already today than we as drivers. 1,000 times better. So it's a no-brainer that we go out, because we are just not as good as the car. And for safety reasons, environmental reasons, whatever, urban planning reasons, there are so many economic benefits to having the human factor taken out of the equation. It's not going to be Uber that does this, it's we. That's what I think will happen. And it's already happening, they're already driving, and you already can have your pizzas delivered with a drone in Dubai, and so on. So the future of transportation, I don't think, is going to involve millions of people in the 21st century. Come on, we're a highly educated, highly productive economy. We're not going to see millions of people just wasting their time driving from A to B. It's not going to happen. They will move up to better jobs in the labor market. That's what I think. But in the meantime, there are interesting legal questions. Maybe I can leave that slide for the question session. It's an interesting period, but if you understand what I'm saying to you, is that it is still so small, and we will see where it goes. And I think we should be very careful not jumping to conclusions and changing the DNA of employment law for a business that 10 years down the line will no longer exist. That's what I think.